Hi, firewalkers. Some people break in the fire. Others are built in it. This is the story of the ones who rose. Let's begin the story. Part 1. The Whisper That Shakes Mountains. Have you ever stared into your own eyes in the mirror? Not just looking, but really seeing yourself? Have you ever whispered the dangerous words, "What if I give up now?" Not in anger, not in surrender, but in exhaustion. What if I walk away? From all the blood, the sweat, the sleepless nights, the silent prayers, the years of building and breaking and building again. What if I let it all collapse, just because it hurts? Stop. Breathe. Don't move. Because this is the moment that separates the broken from the reborn. Now, close your eyes. Imagine someone is watching you. No, not your parents, not your friends, not your haters. It's you, but stronger, wiser, future you, the version of you who made it, who didn't quit, who broke every chain that tried to choke the dream. They're standing right behind you, and they are not silent. They're yelling through your bones. Don't quit. Not now. Don't you dare give up on me, because I am you. This story you're reading, it's not some warm hug or motivational fluff. It's war, a war you're already in. Against doubt, against fear, against every quiet whisper in your head that says, "You're not enough." And to win this war, we begin with a soldier. His name? Ethan Cruz. Ethan didn't come from power or privilege or promise. He came from cracks in concrete and dreams scribbled in notebooks that nobody ever read. He wasn't born with a silver spoon. He was handed silence. A silence that screamed every night as he stared at his ceiling and asked, "Why me? Why this life? Why this pain?" He had fire in his chest, a rage to rise, but he also had chains on his feet, real, heavy chains. Chains of self-doubt, chains of poverty, chains of broken promises, chains of people who looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You can't." And yet, there was something Ethan had that most don't. A vision not of fame, not of money, but of freedom. The freedom to breathe without shame. The freedom to become what they said he couldn't. The freedom to live a life that didn't come from survival, but from creation. There were days he wanted to quit. Of course there were. Nights when the only thing he could hear was the echo of his own doubt bouncing off empty walls. But something always stopped him. A whisper. That whisper wasn't from a friend. It wasn't from a book or a speech or a quote on Instagram. It was deeper. It came from within. It said, "You're not done yet. Someone is watching." And Ethan realized he wasn't just fighting for today. He was fighting for the man he was meant to become. The future belongs to those who can hear the silent roar of who they're meant to be. This whisper was like thunder in disguise. It would shake him in the middle of his lowest moments. When he was lying on a cold mattress, heart cracked open, fists clenched in failure. He'd hear it. "I need you to get up." Not for them. For me. For us. His future self wasn't patient. He wasn't soft. He was fierce. And he was watching. Ethan started moving differently. He wasn't just working out. He was breaking limits. He wasn't just reading. He was reprogramming his mind. He wasn't just working jobs. He was building resilience. Every time someone mocked him, it added fuel. Every "you'll never make it" became a challenge, not an insult. Every rejection became redirection. Pain doesn't mean stop. It means you're close to the edge of something great. And still, he wasn't loud. He didn't scream his goals. He showed them. Silently, boldly, relentlessly. You see, Ethan wasn't chasing applause. He was chasing the man in the mirror, the one who refused to give up. People around him didn't get it. They saw his hustle and called it obsession. They saw his standards and called him arrogant. They saw his silence and thought he was lost. But Ethan, he wasn't lost. He was locked in. And as the world kept spinning, something inside him started to shift. The whisper became a voice. The voice became a fire. And the fire became a roar. Success isn't for the lucky. It's for the relentless. And Ethan was relentless. Part 2. Storms don't scare lions. Ethan was just 17 when the storm hit. Not thunder in the sky. Not rain tapping at windows. But a storm that started somewhere deeper. Somewhere most people never talk about. The kind that tears through your home without making a sound. The kind that doesn't flood your street, but floods your heart. His dad, the man he had once looked up to like a giant, simply walked out one morning and never looked back. No goodbye, no warning, just silence. And that silence? It screamed louder than any fight ever could. His mother, shattered by the abandonment, sank into a heavy, colorless fog of depression. She stopped cooking, stopped laughing, stopped living. The light in her eyes faded like a candle forgotten in the wind. Bills stacked up like Jenga blocks ready to collapse. Disconnection notices, overdue rent, empty shelves, and Ethan, the same boy who once believed he could move mountains, felt buried under them instead. He tried to hold it together, for his mother, for himself, but holding up a crumbling house with bare hands, it breaks you. Slowly, quietly, his grades plummeted. He drifted through hallways like a ghost, invisible to everyone, even himself. Smiles became rare. Laughter? Non-existent. But the worst part? It wasn't the chaos around him. It was the chaos within. That whisper in his head had changed. It no longer told him to fight. It began to ask, what if they were right? What if you really aren't enough? And on one particularly cold night, under a leaking roof with raindrops hitting the floor like clock ticks counting down his hope, Ethan sat alone on his creaky bed. No lights, no warmth, just a cracked ceiling, a hollow heart, and a storm raging inside. And he whispered, barely audible but deadly honest, maybe it's time to quit. But something happened. A spark, a flash, a sudden strike of memory, like lightning splitting the dark. He saw his 10-year-old self, wild-eyed and fearless, sitting at a cheap desk with crumpled paper all around, drawing comic books with broken pencils, creating worlds where he was the hero. A kid who didn't care about bills or betrayal or being realistic. He believed in dreams, in greatness, in himself. And that kid, he was still there, still inside, still watching. Rock bottom isn't a grave. It's the birthplace of greatness. The memory hit like thunder, not just a thought, a reminder of who he was before the world tried to tell him who to be. That 10-year-old didn't care about failure. He didn't flinch at storms. He didn't fear falling because he hadn't yet been told he couldn't fly. And suddenly, something inside Ethan cracked, not from weakness, but from awakening. He stood up, not in triumph, but in defiance. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand, the way warriors wipe blood, not to hide the pain, but to show they're not done yet. He didn't say, I'm going to conquer the world. He said something stronger. I'm not done. I'm not quitting. I'm getting back up. He wasn't chasing instant victory. He was choosing something far more powerful. The decision to show up again. You don't need to win today. You just need to refuse to stay down. The next morning, the world looked the same. Same leaking ceiling. Same unpaid bills. Same fading eyes of a mother stuck in sadness. But Ethan wasn't the same. He got up early, did 20 push-ups, not because he had to, but because he could. A small win. A first step. Then he made a list, short but sharp. Finish homework. Apply for part-time work. Write one story page. Help mom with dishes. Don't quit. That last line, it was circled twice. Bold, red, fierce. And when the doubt came crawling back, as it always does, he faced it like a lion stares down the storm. Storms don't scare lions. They sharpen them. He wasn't roaring yet, but he was ready. Ready to push. Ready to crawl through the mud, if that's what it took. Because now, he remembered who he was fighting for. Not for attention, not for approval, but for that kid inside who never stopped believing. The world hadn't changed, but Ethan had picked up his sword again. And this time, he wasn't backing down. Part 3. Broken Crayons, Still Color Legends. Ethan didn't wait for perfect. He didn't wait for applause. He didn't wait for the world to hand him permission. He just started. Tiny steps, small sparks, quiet victories. He dug out his old sketches, those same comic book characters he used to dream up as a kid, and turned them into mini stories. Hand-drawn, raw, imperfect, real. He stapled the pages together, slapped a bold title across the top, and started selling them to classmates for $1 each. Most shrugged. Some laughed. A few called it childish. But Ethan? He just smiled. Lions don't explain their roar to sheep. Every dollar he earned wasn't just money. It was belief. It was a vote for his vision. He saved every cent. While other teens were out partying or scrolling endlessly, Ethan was sketching, writing, folding, selling. And when the school bell rang, his workday didn't end, it began. He took night shifts at a local diner, washing dishes, wiping tables, taking orders with tired eyes but a relentless heart. People mocked him. Coworkers joked about his silly comic book dreams. Even a few teachers rolled their eyes, subtly pushing him toward more realistic goals. But Ethan knew what they didn't. He wasn't chasing cute drawings. He was building something bigger than their understanding. Dreams are only ridiculous to those who've stopped having them. And with every paycheck, he bought supplies. Not shoes, not games, not distractions. Journals, markers, printing paper, tools to shape his escape. Then came the bold move. He sent one of his short stories, a piece that had taken weeks to refine, to a small local magazine. He waited, heart pounding. Rejected. Tried again. Rejected. And again. Then again. 29 times. Each rejection came with cold, clipped sentences. Not the right fit. Lacks depth. Will pass. But Ethan didn't fold. He took notes. Analyzed every no. Studied storytelling like a soldier studies strategy. Then, on his 30th try a yes. It wasn't grand. Just a paragraph published in a tiny community zine. No paycheck. No spotlight. Just a name printed in black ink. But to Ethan, it was more than ink. It was proof that he could break through. Sometimes the door isn't locked. You just have to keep knocking. That one yes changed everything. Not because it made him famous, but because it made him believe louder. Confidence surged through him like lightning. He launched a blog, raw, real, full of stories no one else was brave enough to tell. Every morning before work, every night after it, he wrote. About pain, about pushing, about hope, about how broken crayons still color, and sometimes they color legends. At first, no one noticed. Then slowly they did. One reader shared it, then another, then 10, then 50. People started emailing him, thanking him, crying through his words, saying, "This saved me," saying, "This sounds like my life." Sponsors reached out. Small ones at first, coffee brands, journal companies, indie publishers. But they believed in his voice. By the time Ethan turned 21, he had built a small but fiercely loyal online community. And he did something bold. He self-published his first book. It wasn't flashy. No big launch party. No media coverage. No shelf space at giant bookstores. Just a PDF link. A simple website. And a heart poured into every page. The book didn't break records. It didn't make him rich. But it broke something far more important. The invisible chains he had carried for years. The chains of silence. The chains of doubt. The chains of "you'll never make it." A single voice can shake 1,000 silent hearts. People started listening. Not because he was famous. Not because he was polished. But because he was real. His stories weren't just entertainment. They were mirrors. Mirrors that reflected pain, persistence, and power. Readers felt seen. And Ethan felt something he hadn't in years. Alive. The world hadn't given him a platform. So he built one. The system didn't open doors. So he kicked them open with words. The voices that once laughed at his dream, some of them are now sending him DMs like, "Bro, I always knew you'd do something big." Funny how fast silence turns into praise once the noise gets too loud to ignore. But Ethan didn't post clapbacks, didn't throw shade. He stayed focused because he knew this wasn't the peak. It was just the path. And the boy who once sold $1 comics in hallways was now crafting stories that were being read in living rooms across the world. Part 4. Fuel your fire, not your fears. Success doesn't come wrapped in gold. It doesn't arrive with a marching band or fireworks. It comes as a test, a fire, a monster, a mirror that asks, "Are you really who you say you are?" By 25, Ethan Cruz had climbed far from that leaking roof bedroom. His blog had exploded. His first book, a raw, bleeding heart on pages, was making quiet waves. He had started a small storytelling company, hiring underdogs like himself. People who weren't polished, but powerful. But then, like all true warriors face, came the trial. A business deal, huge potential, a media company with promises, press, and plenty of zeros. He trusted them. Why wouldn't he? They looked him in the eye, smiled, talked big, and they lied. Contracts twisted, royalties stolen. Suddenly, Ethan wasn't a rising star. He was a defendant. Lawsuits, frozen funds, lost trust, and worst of all, the betrayal didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone he had once called a brother. That stung deeper than any courtroom ever could. It's not the enemy's sword that cuts deepest. It's the friend's silence. Within weeks, he lost thousands. Had to lay off team members. Had to watch something he built be torn apart, line by line, clause by clause. And once again, the voice returned. That old, cunning whisper. "You've done enough. You prove your point. Quit now, before you lose more." He heard it not in rage, but in exhaustion. He was tired tired of being the fighter, tired of being the one who always had to rise, tired of bleeding for dreams that sometimes felt too expensive to carry. One evening, Ethan checked into a small hotel, far from home, far from noise, just him, a window, and the weight of everything crumbling. He stood in silence, staring out at the city. Tall buildings, cold lights. Everything looked so alive, except for him. Was this it? Was this how the story ends? Not with a crash, but a quiet fade? No one knew where he was. No calls, no emails, just a man staring down his limits. But life, real life, has a strange timing. It doesn't always rescue you with miracles. Sometimes it saves you with a whisper, a letter, one envelope, no return address, just his name scribbled in shaky handwriting. Inside, a note from a 14-year-old girl. She said she had stumbled upon his blog during her darkest night. She had been bullied, abandoned, ready to end it all, until she read his words. She said, "You made me believe I wasn't broken, just unfinished." Then added, "You didn't quit, so I didn't either." Ethan didn't blink for minutes, just sat with the letter pressed to his chest like a heartbeat he had forgotten he had. Tears didn't fall. They rushed. Every tear was a story. Every sob was a scream that had waited too long. And in that moment, something powerful ignited. When pain meets purpose, it doesn't burn you, it builds you. He didn't sleep that night, didn't eat, didn't scroll. He wrote, with fury, with clarity, with everything inside him. He poured every betrayal, every loss, every aching scar into a manuscript. No filter, no fluff, just truth. That book became his heartbeat. He titled it with a message to himself and to every fighter barely holding on. The fight isn't over. And this time, the world didn't just notice. It responded. The book flew off shelves. Translations rolled in from across continents. Podcasts, interviews, stage lights. But more than that, letters. Hundreds, thousands. From people who didn't need polished stories. They needed real ones. People who weren't looking for perfect heroes. They needed wounded warriors who still showed up. Ethan became more than an author. He became a movement. Your story isn't your shame, it's your sword. He didn't go back to the old company, didn't chase revenge. He moved forward, built stronger, smarter, bolder. He started a foundation, one that gave teens from broken homes tools to write, to speak, to heal. Because he knew a pen in a wounded hand can change the world. And whenever doubt tried creeping back, whenever the world's noise tried to dim his fire, he read that same letter from the girl. Folded, worn, sacred, because it reminded him he wasn't writing for fame. He wasn't creating for likes. He was telling stories that saved lives, including his own. Part 5, Your Turn to Fight. Now Ethan stands before roaring crowds and silent hearts alike, not as a man who had it easy, but as living proof that scars make warriors. He doesn't just speak, he ignites. He doesn't share hope. He hands it over like a torch to anyone standing in the dark. His voice shakes ceilings as he says, "There's someone counting on you, someone you haven't even met yet, your future self. And they don't need you to be perfect. They need you to show up, to fight through it, to claw through the noise, the pressure, the fear, and the fake voices screaming stop. They need you to roar back, not today. Because here's the truth Ethan learned the hard way. You are building something even when it feels like you're breaking. Every failed attempt is laying a brick. Every long night is shaping your spine. Every doubt you survive is sharpening your edge. You think it's a mess. Your future self calls it a masterpiece in the making. You don't owe the world your silence. You owe yourself the victory. And that victory isn't about trophies. It's not about applause. It's about knowing you didn't give in when you could have. It's about waking up one day and realizing you're the reason someone else didn't quit. So don't stop. Not now. Not when it's cold. Not when it's unclear. Not when you feel forgotten. Quitting is a thief dressed as relief. It whispers comfort, but steals legacy. Instead, lean in. Break the silence. Burn through fear. Cry if you must. Scream if you need. But walk forward anyway. You're not weak for struggling. You're dangerous for surviving. Ask yourself, who are you becoming in the chaos? Because that version of you, the one who's calm in the storm, steady in the quake, unbreakable in the fire, they're already watching, waiting, cheering. And one day, you will meet them. And when you do, they won't say, "Thanks for quitting." They'll say, "Thank you for not giving up on me." Let this be the anthem you hear when the world feels loud and your spirit feels quiet. When no one texts back, when the door doesn't open, when the paycheck's short, the energy's low, and the dream seems far. Because that's the test. Not when it's easy, when it's brutal, when it hurts. That's when greatness takes root. So go, build, fall, rise, repeat. Let your tears water the ground you'll one day stand on as a giant. Let this be the story carved into your bones. The story you whisper to yourself on the worst night of your life. Because one day, one powerful, radiant day, you'll look back and say, "I wasn't buried. I was planted, and I grew fire." With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.